My girlfriend told her ex-boyfriend that the three of us could live in my apartment, so I evicted her. My name is Arlo, and I'm 31. This story isn't about anger or revenge, it's about learning to listen to the small voice inside you that whispers, "This isn't right," long before things fall apart. I met Marissa at my cousin's wedding. She was sitting across the reception table, quiet but observant, the kind of person who listens with her whole presence. We started talking between the toasts and the first dances. She told me she worked at a youth outreach center. I told her I managed supply chain operations. She laughed at how different our worlds sounded. But something clicked. In the early days, she had a way of making everything feel intentional. She'd text me reminders to drink water, bring me little gifts that matched offhand things I'd mentioned, like a book about Florence after I'd said I wanted to travel there someday. I'm not easily charmed, but with her, it was effortless. We dated for 5 months before she suggested moving in together. Her rent had gone up, she said, and we were spending most of our time at my place anyway. My apartment was modest, 1 bedroom, 2nd floor, surrounded by retirees, but she called it a cozy hideout. We agreed I'd cover rent, and she'd pitch in for groceries and utilities. I wasn't keeping score. I trusted her. At first, it felt like I'd made the right choice. We settled into a rhythm. Shared meals. Laughed at inside jokes. She always had stories from work, and I liked listening. I'd come home from long days to someone who asked about my mood and actually cared about the answer. Then one name started surfacing more and more often: Grayson. Grayson and I watched that documentary last year. This reminds me of the place Grayson took me for my birthday. Grayson used to say that you two would get along. At first, I brushed it off. We all have pasts. Mentioning them isn't a red flag, not always. But it wasn't just passing references. It was daily. Sometimes several times a day. And every time she said his name, her voice shifted, softened, like she was replaying something golden. I told myself I was overthinking it. But part of me began to notice how her gaze drifted when she talked about him, how her smile came from some place I didn't recognize. Then came the dinner. I'd found a recipe online, something a little fancy, with thyme and lemon zest. I wanted to surprise her. She took a bite, smiled, and said, "Grayson made a sauce like this once. He added more thyme. His version had more depth." The comment was small, but it struck something deep. That night, while she was brushing her teeth, I stared at my reflection and asked the mirror a question I'd never had to ask before in a relationship: am I being slowly replaced in my own life? The next few weeks didn't bring relief. They brought patterns. She'd start mentioning him in new ways. "Grayson fixed my car once. Grayson hated this show. Grayson always said." I started staying late at work. Took on extra shifts. Sat alone in the break room with cold coffee just to delay walking through the door of my own home. My best friend Theo noticed. "You seem off, man. Everything good with Marissa?" I gave him a half answer. Something about stress. He didn't press. But I could see it in his eyes, he wasn't buying it. I wasn't sure I was either. Then came the night that would change everything. I was making stir-fry. Nothing fancy, just trying out a new sauce I'd found at the market. She came home from yoga, full of energy, scrolling on her phone. "Hey," she said, plucking a piece of bell pepper from the cutting board. "So, there's something I've been thinking about." Those words always mark a turning point. "What's up?" I asked, not looking up from the pan. "So, Grayson, his lease is ending. The building he's in is being sold. He doesn't have a place to go yet. I told him he could stay with us for a bit. Just until he gets back on his feet." I stopped stirring. "You told him?" She smiled, casual as if she just said she invited a friend for coffee. "Yeah. I mean, just for a month or two. He's quiet. Handy. Actually, you could learn from him, he's great with tools. And he's an amazing cook." I felt the blood leave my face. "You're asking me to let your ex-boyfriend move into my apartment?" She shrugged. "We're friends now. That's all it is." I stared at her. But she wasn't joking. She genuinely believed this wasn't a big deal. And in that moment, something inside me didn't just crack, it cleared. This wasn't my home anymore. Not really. It was a stage for her to play out a script I hadn't agreed to. I looked at her and said, "Okay." Her eyes lit up. "Really? That's great. I knew you'd understand." She walked to the shower, already texting, no doubt letting him know the coast was clear. I stood alone in the kitchen. The stir-fry hissed quietly on the stove. But all I could hear was the sound of my boundaries collapsing. But not for long. That was the night I made the decision. The lot would change. The chapter would close. And no one would be moving in but their own shadow. When the door shut behind her, something shifted. The apartment, usually humming with her playlists or the scent of incense, fell silent. The air felt clearer, lighter, as if it, too, had been waiting for a moment to exhale. I stood in the middle of my kitchen, hands still gripping the spatula, and let the quiet settle over me like armor. She had no idea what that okay meant. She thought it was surrender. It was actually the beginning of the end. I started packing her things that night. Not in anger. In clarity. I moved from room to room, identifying everything that belonged to her: clothing, hair products, stacks of wellness books she never read but displayed prominently. I took my time, folding items gently, setting aside what was hers with respect but finality. I didn't feel rage. I felt resolve. Then I opened the bottom drawer of my desk, the one she'd gradually filled with personal keepsakes. Inside was a shoebox. I opened it. Photos. Ticket stubs. Letters. The top one was dated 2 months ago. The handwriting was neat, familiar. Grayson's. I missed the way we talked about nothing and everything. I'm still not sure letting go was the right choice. If you ever want to talk, really talk, I'll be here. Still yours, in ways I probably shouldn't be. I closed the box and placed it in the bin without a word. By the time I'd filled 2 suitcases and 3 storage tubs, it was just past 8 p.m. I checked the clock. Marissa usually spent at least an hour at the store, and another 2 with her friend Clara. Or whoever she was really seeing. I called a locksmith. The first one was busy. The second said he couldn't come until morning. The third, a guy named Leo, said he'd be over within the hour. He sounded tired, but willing. By 9 p.m., Leo was at my door, toolbox in hand. He looked at the packed bins and said nothing. Just nodded, took a look at my ID and the lease, then got to work. "You doing okay?" he asked quietly as he unscrewed the old deadbolt. "I am now," I said. By 9:30, I had 2 new keys and a reinforced lock. I tipped Leo extra and thanked him not just for the service, but for arriving exactly when I needed him. He gave me a small, understanding smile and said, "Better to fix a lock than live in one." I wasn't sure what he meant at the time. But it stuck. I took each bin, each bag, down to the curb. 4 trips. Neatly arranged. I wasn't trying to shame her. Just making space. Before locking the door behind me, I snapped a photo of the pile. Time-stamped. Documented. Then I opened my laptop. Marissa had signed into her Google account on it months ago and never logged out. I pulled up her contacts. Searched Grayson. There he was, listed under a fake company name. Clever. I sent a message. Marissa said you'd be happy to have her. Her things are outside. I've made room. 10 minutes passed. No reply. Then the storm started. My phone lit up like a pinball machine. 5 missed calls. Then 10. Then the messages. "Where is my stuff? You're out of your mind. This is abusive. I'm calling the police. You can't just throw me out. This is illegal." I turned my phone on silent and sat down on the couch. I wasn't scared. I was awake. What followed wasn't rage. It wasn't chaos. It was inevitable. By 11:15 p.m., the pounding on my door began. "Arlo. Open the door. This isn't funny." I peeked through the peephole. Marissa stood there, hair damp from the rain, mascara running. Behind her, Grayson. He looked taller than I expected. Wore a button-up. Had the kind of hair that looked effortless but clearly took effort. His hands were in his pockets. He looked everywhere but at the door. "This is still my home," she shouted. "This is my apartment," I said, voice steady. "My name's on the lease. You tried to move in someone without my consent. I didn't agree to that. You can't do this to me. You did this to yourself." Grayson mumbled something behind her, too quiet to hear. She spun around and snapped at him before returning to the door. "Arlo, this isn't over. I'm calling 911. She did. I heard every word, her voice trembling, painting herself as the victim, cast out into the night by her cruel, unstable partner. It would have been convincing if I hadn't known better. 15 minutes later, one of the neighbors yelled from a balcony. Take it somewhere else, lady. Some of us work in the morning. Eventually, Grayson coaxed her down the stairs. Her voice echoed as she walked away. You'll regret this. I didn't. Not then. Not ever. That night, I slept with both new locks bolted and a calm I hadn't felt in months. The next morning, the sun came through the blinds like it always did, but it felt different. Brighter. Less filtered. I made coffee and sat quietly on the couch, listening to the silence of my apartment. No background chatter. No one walking in mid-call. Just the steady hum of the refrigerator and the soft clink of my spoon in the mug. It was peaceful. Almost unfamiliar. Then my phone buzzed. A new number. I let it go to voicemail. Then another message. And another. Finally, one that stood out. You owe me for everything you did. I had nowhere to sleep. You've ruined my life. I saved every message. Then came a call from Jen, one of Marissa's closest friends. I hesitated before answering, but curiosity won. Arlo, she said. I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I need to talk to you. I braced myself. Okay. I just got off the phone with Marissa. She's spiraling. Said you threw her out and that she's homeless. I waited. But here's the thing, she continued, her voice cautious. I've known her a long time. And I've seen her rewrite things before. Meaning? She left out the part about Grayson. Didn't mention him at all. She told you she was coming to see you that night, right? Jen paused. Yeah. She did. She wasn't. She came home, told me Grayson needed a place to stay, and acted like it was already decided. Jen was silent. Then, that explains a lot. We talked for 20 minutes. She was careful, but honest. It was clear that even Marissa's friends were beginning to see cracks. She's complicated, Jen said finally. And I think she's scared people are starting to see who she really is. I thanked her and hung up. Then I called Theo and told him everything. Every detail. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he said. She tried to erase you before she even left. That stuck with me. By the afternoon, the texts had shifted from outrage to bargaining. Can I at least get my work laptop? I need my birth certificate. Please just let me grab the cactus. I responded once. I left what I found with the building manager. You're not coming inside. I'm not safe with you here. No reply. That night, I got another call, this time from someone I didn't know. A woman named Lila. Hi, you don't know me. I used to date Grayson. I saw your number on a post in one of the safety forums. Someone said you might want to talk. My chest tightened. What kind of forums? The kind where women warn each other. She didn't need to explain further. Grayson wasn't just charming and manipulative, he was dangerous. She told me everything. About hidden phones. About the roommate incident. About the confrontation that ended with police intervention and a hospital visit. He'd been caught recording someone in a bathroom. Secretly. Intentionally. Marissa knew? I asked. She was tagged in one of the threads weeks ago. She replied. Said it was all lies from a jealous ex. Lila's voice broke. It wasn't a lie. And it wasn't just me. She sent me screenshots. Forum threads. One after another. Grayson's name. His photo. Testimonies. Tags. And there, beneath it all, a comment. Still defends him. Protect yourself. Don't trust her either. I didn't sleep that night. Not out of fear. Out of realization. If I hadn't acted when I did, if I'd hesitated, he would have been under my roof. A man who violated women's privacy and dismissed consequences. And Marissa? She knew. She didn't care. I called Marcus. Told him everything. Sent him the files. He gave me the response I needed. You're in the clear. You did the right thing. But save everything. If she tries to take this public, we'll be ready. I was ready now. Not just for her. For closure. The next few days passed like a slow uncoiling. No more phone calls. No more late-night knocks. The apartment held its stillness like a quiet breath. But I knew silence from Marissa never lasted. And I was right. For days after the lockout, I ran into Jenica, an acquaintance from work, in a downtown cafe. We'd spoken a handful of times in the office elevator, mostly about books or weather. That morning, she was flipping through a novel by the window when I walked in. "Hey, Arlo," she said, looking up. Her tone was soft, cautious. "How's your week?" "Getting better," I said honestly. She nodded. "I heard things about Marissa." I raised an eyebrow. "My roommate's friend follows those safety threads." She mentioned Grayson's name. Then saw Marissa's in the comments. It got around. She wasn't gloating. She was warning me. "It's bad, isn't it?" I asked. Jenica hesitated, then turned her phone toward me. A screenshot filled the screen. The post was long. Detailed. It outlined Grayson's behavior, the footage, the confrontations. And there, highlighted, underlined, was a comment from someone else. Her current boyfriend threw her out. Left her stuff on the street. But can you blame him? Jenica swiped again. A reply. Not the first time she's hidden things like this. People need to know. I stared at the screen, the noise of the cafe fading behind the weight of the words. Does she know this is spreading? I asked. Apparently, yes. And she's not handling it well. I nodded. Thank you. Really? Jenica gave me a small, encouraging smile. Sometimes you don't see someone clearly until they lose their reflection. That night, Marissa called from another new number. I didn't pick up. She left a voicemail. You've ruined me, Arlo. I've lost my job. My sister won't speak to me. I'm being harassed. You did this. You don't get to just walk away. But I had. And I would. Marcus advised me to save the voicemail and forward it to him. It confirms everything, he said. If she tries anything legally, we have a documented timeline, statements, evidence. You're protected. I forwarded it and turned off my phone. The next day, the building manager told me someone had come by to collect the remaining items I'd set aside, just a few books, a potted plant, and a folder of documents. He said it was Grayson. He didn't say much. Just looked tired. Embarrassed. Good. Later, Jen texted me again. She's trying to spin this to everyone. But people are seeing the truth now. She followed up with a screenshot of a conversation in which Marissa tried to frame me as emotionally unstable. The replies pushed back. Didn't you try to move in your ex? I'd have thrown you out too. Her story was unraveling in real time. That night, I made dinner and played an old jazz record I hadn't touched in months. The music filled the room. Not as a background to someone else's chaos, but as the main soundtrack to my peace. Jenica texted around 9. That soup you mentioned, still offering? I smiled. Tomorrow. I'll make the playlist. A month passed. Marissa didn't call again. The last number she'd used was blocked like the rest. I heard through Jen that she was staying with a distant cousin, trying to start fresh. But the damage to her reputation had already rooted too deep. And Grayson? He had become a ghost, someone whose name no longer carried weight in my world. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was relief. Not because someone else fell, but because I'd managed to step away before they dragged me down with them. Theo and I grabbed lunch one afternoon, and after I shared the full story, he leaned back and said, "Man, it's like you dodged a falling building." He wasn't wrong. Marissa had built a structure of half-truths and soft manipulation. I'd lived in it too long without seeing the cracks. But the day I said okay, I didn't just avoid the collapse. I walked out before it hit the ground. Jenica and I started seeing more of each other. It was gentle, unhurried. We spent time walking through bookstores, sharing meals, and listening to music. She never asked about Marissa directly, but she always knew when to give space or lean in. It was what peace sounded like. One Saturday afternoon, we sat on my balcony. The light was soft, and a breeze moved through the leaves. I never asked, she said, but what made you finally draw the line? I thought for a long time. I didn't recognize myself anymore, I said. I was quieter. Tired. Doubting things I never doubted before. And the moment I realized I wasn't being heard or even seen, I knew staying would cost more than leaving. She nodded, then reached for my hand. I didn't need to say more. That night, as I stood in the kitchen making tea, I noticed something. The apartment, the one she used to call a cozy hideout, finally felt like it belonged to me again. Not because of the walls or furniture, but because of who I was inside it. The man I used to be, confident, thoughtful, grounded, was back. And he wasn't waiting for anyone to approve of his piece. Sometime later, I found Marissa's old notebook while cleaning a drawer. For a moment, I considered opening it. But I didn't. I placed it in a small box labeled past, closed the lid, and stored it away. Because the story I was living now no longer needed footnotes from chapters that had ended. Instead, it had something else. Beginnings. Epilogue, lessons learned. Months have passed since that turning point. I've changed, not in loud ways, but in meaningful ones. I speak more clearly. Say no without guilt. I don't chase closure from people who thrive in confusion. People often think justice looks like punishment. But sometimes it looks like silence. Distance. The sound of your own footsteps walking towards something better. Marissa never apologized. Grayson never owned up. But I didn't need them to. Because this story, my story, wasn't about their transformation. It was about mine. And if you're ever standing where I stood, wondering if the small betrayals really matter, if the quiet erasures of your worth are worth addressing, hear this. They do. They are. And you deserve more. Always. Thank you for watching the video, like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.